Welcome back to Pardon Our Honesty, where I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Megan.
And today we are deep diving into this fabulous topic of post-traumatic stress syndrome. Did I say that right? Let me see.
PTSD. Some people say PTSS and some say PTSD.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
But some people do say
yes.
SS.
I call it just simply PTSD because that's what everybody knows it as. So this subject is kind of close to both of us because while I suffer from PTSD, it is because of my childhood trauma as well as my experience in the military. Megan has experience on the other side of that of being a partner with someone who has PTSD. It can be challenging for sure, having it and then dealing with it. But that's what we're going to talk about today, guys. So are you ready for this journey?
We are glad you're here with us.
All right, Megan, you start.
All right. So our start today is how did you know as somebody with PTSD? Did you get diagnosed, or if you did, what led you to getting diagnosed with PTSD? Like, what would the signs be for somebody from your perspective? And then I'll give my perspective from the observer side.
So I didn't get diagnosed immediately with PTSD. Immediately, I got diagnosed with depression. And so this was when I was in the military. They go through this questionnaire every time you have an appointment just to verify, is this person experiencing a mental illness or not? And basically the questions are, do you have little interest in activities you used to enjoy? Do you find yourself avoiding memories of a traumatic event? Do you avoid places? Are you easily startled? So for me, I think the main symptom I have is those triggers of if somebody came out of the door, I'm going to jump because I'm always on edge. Or if your voice sounds like something that happened during my trauma, I might be a little standoffish and kind of change in my attitude, my body language, or whatever towards you. And from the military experience, if I hear gunfire or a loud bang or something like that, it's going to trigger me to go back to that moment in time of that trauma. And then I'm reliving it. To me, that's how I explain how I experience PTSD.
I think one of the things that you said rings very familiar with me is when you said they originally diagnosed you with depression. Mm-hmm. So my first husband, I wouldn't say he had a traumatic childhood or anything like that, but he was in the military, he went through a couple deployments, and after those deployments, he came back a very different person, a little bit more subdued, was sleeping all the time, not a lot of motivation to go anywhere because of the crowds, the cars on the road. So his came from the military aspect, but the depression is the first thing that really stood out from a bystander, because there was this person who was always kind of lazy. I mean, he was always kind of lazy, not in a negative way, but would like to sit and watch TV and stuff. Yeah. But the sleeping, forgetting to pick up the kid, not wanting to go in all the groups and do stuff. And like you see as a partner or friend, anybody, you see that withdrawal. And it's, and with my partner now, it's the same thing. He said his mind feels like it's always on heightened alert. So like we go anywhere and we've got to talk about the exits and we've got to stand a certain place. And if there's too many people in a small room, we're not going. If there's too many cars on the road, he's not comfortable, because in his brain, he feels like somebody could approach us or you're going to run over something. Yeah. And as a partner to that, you see those things. Because for me, I'm like, oh, let's go do this. And then you get this like pushback. Well, there'll be a lot of people, or, I want to sit over here. And you're like, you're so lame. No. But like you start to notice as a partner, those things that people, and I think, PTSD can come from childhood traumas. Yeah. I'm most familiar with it with people who have military service. And I think it's hard sometimes for us as the person who doesn't really have it to understand like how your brain works.
Yes. I think that's the most challenging part of my relationship with my husband, is him understanding the triggers and what happens with the triggers and where my mind goes, and like, you're 40 years removed from this incident, or you're what, 4 years removed from the military, why are you still having these issues? And I think it's not something that ever goes away.
I agree.
And so how do you deal with it personally is going to be the best way to get past this hurdle of, okay, this PTSD does not affect my life or control my life. And then being able to explain to your partner, hey, this is my trigger. Like you're saying your partner does. We sit in a certain place in the restaurant. I don't like to sit with my back to the door because I need to be able to, okay, if something pops off, I get nervous, I get that fight or flight moment, then I know where I can go, where I can get down to take cover or whatever, or I can defend myself. So I think therapy.
Yeah, it really does, because it's, it can,
Therapy.
I can see, how it can affect relationships, because if you don't, and the communication, but if you don't understand it, like you're saying, your partner needs to understand, and there's still times that I should be more understanding than I am. Like, I'm the person who's like, you walk past me in the parking lot, I'm like, hey, how are you? And I'm like friendly to everybody. And my partner is looking him up and down, and is like, not because he's judging anybody. He's like, are they carrying? Are they this? Are they coming too close to me? Why are they walking towards me? Like, in our community, there's a lot of homeless, and that really, like, not that they're homeless or they're asking, but how fast they approach you.
Yeah.
And that, always creates like this, like, I could
moment.
see it,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's just immediate evaluation. But I also have friends that have had witness traumas that have affected them, and they have marital, is that a word? Marital.
No, marital is
marital
problems.
Sure. Like maybe sexually, right? Because of things they witnessed as a child, or things that happened to them as a child, and the partner's thinking, you were 2, like, or 5, you need to get over that. But I don't think it's that easy.
No, it's not that easy. And like you're saying, PTSD doesn't always come from this like explosive traumatic event. It could be from, like you're saying, somebody witnessed something. For me in the military, my job was to read the things that were happening. And so for me, although I wasn't right there in the center of the action, pulling the trigger, I read it. And so, or I watched it. And so that was that reinforcing of, you got to protect yourself. You got to be aware. You can't let this happen to you. That just reinforced that original trauma that I had. But it's not always I was there, I touched it, I had to do it myself. And a lot of people don't understand that PTSD can come from anything.
Right. And the matter of managing it, I think admitting it first.
Yeah.
So for the people that feel maybe their partner has it, their partner doesn't say it, their partner doesn't acknowledge it, but you're seeing these habit changes, you're seeing we can't go to certain places because they don't like it, or you're seeing that you want to try something with them and they're immediately turned off or back off. Those are probably things to talk about versus getting upset about. Like, I noticed we can never go to a crowded place, or I noticed
we can't do fireworks.
Right. Or, even outside of that, like maybe you want me to do things in the bedroom that I'm not willing to do. Well, maybe you ask, why is that, and communicate that, and they may not understand it. Yeah. But if I feel the more honest you are about what is going on, like my previous partner, my ex-husband, I knew him inside and out. So I knew something wasn't right. I was there through, then after he went through combat, his best friend committed suicide from those combats. Wow. Then his mother died of cancer. And this was all within years of each other, short years. And you could see that, how it affected that person. My partner now is very, I don't want to say denial, because they know, and we've talked about it, but it's very like, that's not going to stop me from doing anything. And this is not, but that also is, I feel like the more you cover it and the more you just try to work through it without acknowledging it and processing and taking the things you need to work through it, it's almost like you're just pushing it down.
Well, I think first we have to start off of, okay, so the person, you notice they're having PTSD symptoms or some kind of mental health symptom. Culturally, for my culture, we don't go to therapy. We don't talk to a therapist. There's nothing wrong with you. That's for crazy people. We don't do that. You better pull up your bootstraps, put your pants on like a big girl or a big boy, and get your ass out there and do what you're supposed to do. So culturally, your partner might not be receptive to it because of that. And then on the other side, gender wise, men are
we're too strong for that.
I'm
we're
going
too big
to,
for that. Yeah.
I want to beat this thing. It's not going to beat me, and just march through the thorns and get cut all up and not, be willing to say, well, crap, there is something wrong with me. And I think that's a challenge for any male. And how do you get through to them? I haven't figured it out yet.
If you have any tips,
I haven't figured it out.
Share it. Yeah.
I haven't figured it out.
But I feel like it's the more normal it becomes. I feel like one thing I could say to the younger generation is they are very open about everything.
Yes.
Oh, I go to counseling, or I have this feeling, I have that. They're very open, and I think that's opening a new door moving forward. But our generation and back is not just something even a totally different subject, but just for example, like today, the kid's going to have somebody come over tomorrow and the mom's like, oh, he has ADHD medicine and he does this. And I'm like, she's so open about it, where, before people try to hide it and we don't talk about it and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's how it is with PTSD. I think when people, if you're not educated or you don't know somebody with it, you think, oh, PTSD, they're just messed up. Yeah. I think people initially think that.
Yeah, they do. But the military has also changed, as you're saying, with the generations. As the younger generation comes along and says, hey, this is kind of normal, this is what we do, then the military, I think, has also been in the forefront of adapting to those changes. So when I came in the military, you better not go to mental health, because that was the first exit. Right. You're going home.
I agree.
You're crazy and we don't have time to deal with crazy. So thank you for your service, but we don't need you anymore. Now it's about being strong and being brave and opening up to say, hey, I need to take a knee. I'm going to go see this therapist, get myself together, and I'm going to come back. And you're being allowed that latitude to do that, as before you just didn't.
And I think in regards to the military aspect, now I've been completely removed now for 4 years. But prior to that, I don't feel they were quite there yet, because I know people would go see people off post with no records, pay cash, do not use insurance, because they did not want their teams or anything to know that that's what they were doing. And I think that's, especially people in our age group, that's the mindset that they have. Like, we're going to keep it a secret. We're not going to talk about it. But I think even, I will say, like, for widowers, so my dad died, nothing we ever expected. And I think that was kind of a PTSD thing for her, because she went through a depression. Then she went through a buying binge. Everything needed to be bought, And you on the outside think, you just make these like, oh, she's just sad, but it's probably PTSD, because she was so traumatized by the events that led up to that, the death itself, and it happening so fast that you didn't get to process it. And I think we kind of overlook that it happens in those forms too.
Yeah, that's true. I think the same thing for my father-in-law. He actually had to work on my mother-in-law until the paramedics got there. And so, his whole
cute
life.
When people say that.
What?
Father-in-law.
That's my father. I love him.
I know, but it's such a nice way people say that now. That's a new generational thing too. It's so nice. Sister-in-love. That's so nice.
Now, I had some in-laws.
I'm just saying, that's nice. In-love is nice.
But yeah, I think that is traumatic, and that's something that we haven't given space to allow to say that I just went through a traumatic event. What am I going to do with this? How do I heal? And, I have a grief counselor that still comes to see me right now, and I really don't know what to say to him, or he doesn't really know what to say to me, because everybody grieves differently, and I'm way different from the average person. So,
but I think I think it always comes back to what we always talk about, is being able to communicate it. And I think look for signs. If you notice you're always fighting with somebody about something, or even in children, children lose parents, or children witness horrible things, and then they have bad behavior, or they're not completing things. Besides the trauma itself, they probably have PTSD, and without communicating, acknowledging, and talking, and getting them to talk about it in counseling, of course, we always say counseling, or self-help, I think, in my opinion, I feel like that's why the suicide is so high in the military, the retirees, military, is because their minds can't stop. The things they're dealing with, they're seeing it on a daily basis. They don't know how to cope with it. And it can come from somebody who is getting help and somebody who's not, and they just have enough.
Yeah.
And I think the more openly we can talk about it and they find peers that can relate to them and say, dude, I know exactly how you're feeling, I think that opens up a better means of communication. But I think it's the signs. So what would you say some signs if somebody was listening right now and said, I know my friend, or I know my husband or wife or my daughter has gone through a traumatic experience, what are some signs I should look for that maybe we should talk more about that?
They stop doing things that they used to enjoy and love. There are moments where they're just like zoned out. They're not actively engaged with you or what's going on around them. They're easily startled. Like if you're coming, I remember coming back from Iraq, and I was in the house with the kids, and one of them, it was like a wall in between the kitchen and the living room, and they came around and they were like, Mom. And I was like, what the hell? Don't do that. And I traumatized them, like you're saying, because they're like, what the heck is wrong with this lady? She's all jumpy and screaming and hollering all the time. So, easily startled, on edge, doesn't enjoy things that they used to enjoy, like very watchful. Those are some signs that, hey, we need to talk about this and find out what's underneath this. And if you need some help, or is something happened today and you're just doing this today.
Yeah, I think I would say, like, if you notice signs that look like depression, not doing the things they usually do, sleeping, avoiding going outside, things like that. I think the jitteries, the nervousness always of being uncomfortable doing certain things, the mood swings. I think the mood swings are big. One thing can just throw off the whole mood. And I think that's probably a big sign, where if they used to just be, jovial or just, free spirit, and all of a sudden you say one thing wrong, they're like, why would you say that? And like, it's a whole, I think those things, if it wasn't their normal personality before, to me, those are really big signs. And I think everybody's different, because the people that I do know, they're all different. Like, some will just never sit down, and some, it's weird things, they won't go in somebody's house if they don't know them, and like things that they
avoid places
they don't know and they can't assess. And but I think it's something that it's important within any relationship, friendship or relationship, to talk about, because it's sad to see people take their life, and even people that have been highly involved in the church, and they're doing everything right, but there's a lady in the community, and she lost 2 of her sons, but one of them committed suicide. And through her blogs that she was writing, one of the things she kept saying is, we were pushing him to do counseling to deal with these feelings, and instead he did everything else to cover them up, to avoid them. And so I think that's the other thing. If people are keeping themselves so busy that they can't breathe or stop or enjoy anything, it's because they're trying to keep their brain so busy. They probably need counseling or more one-on-one or something, because they're just trying to hide it, basically.
And I think that's what happens when they finally get to a point where they've done everything they could and they finally stop. Then their mind is flooded with everything that they've been trying to run away from, and they can't take it. And like you're saying, they either do something drastic like suicide, overdose, or something like that, just because they can't cope. I would say, like, even from childhood trauma, going through the therapy, there's still some things I can't cope with, simply because I don't have answers. So, for instance, like you're saying, people in the military, do they really have an answer of why they had to do some of the things that gave them trauma?
Right.
They may never have that answer. So how do they cope with that?
Right.
So for me, I just try to remind myself every day of the good things, and I continually go to therapy. I don't think if I hadn't started going to therapy in my 20s and kind of recognizing my thought patterns and what gets me down and my triggers, then, I might be one of those 22.
Yeah. And it's sad. And I think But I will say, just like you, PTSD does not mean the end of the world for anybody.
No.
It's just something you cope with, like ADHD or OCD or eating disorder or whatever, hemorrhoids. I mean, I don't know, anything. Like it's I feel like sometimes people think if they get that label, it's like, oh my gosh, you have PTSD. But like you're successful and you're doing all these things and it's not stopping you from living life, but it is something not to put aside. But I think some people feel like if you get that label, it's a label and it doesn't need to be a negative label. It just has to be, to me, it's like, I know you guys always hate when I use the word warning, but it's almost like a caution sign. Like, okay, PTSD, okay, caution. I know that there's something they're sensitive to.
Yeah.
What it is, I may not know, but it's a caution sign.
Yeah.
So maybe I shouldn't walk right up to them and hug them, or maybe I shouldn't stick them in the back of the room, or maybe I shouldn't, it's kind of like caution.
I think that's a good way to look at it because, like you're saying, if you don't know them intimately, you're not going to know what could set them off back to that point where that trauma occurred. And when you do go in with that caution and that warning, then you're able to allow yourself to be like, okay, let me let my guard down and be vulnerable and open with them so they can share with me some of their triggers. And then now I know how to engage and handle them. And it's not like, oh, I invited Tim over and he blew up in the party and I had no idea why. Right. And you're like just stuck there holding the bag and everybody's looking at you. Why did you invite this crazy ass person? And so that's going to feed into their trauma again.
Yeah.
So,
and I would also, on a side note, those who are diagnosed PTSD, whatever, drugs and alcohol do not help.
What do you mean?
I've never been around a PTSD person who gets drunk and it's positive experience. So
I'm a happy drunk.
Well, good. Maybe that's good for you. So I would say let's not lean towards just drugs and alcohol to make everything better. And make sure like you just said, maybe it was the alcohol at a party and this guy Tim just loses his mind because he has all these flashbacks and people are loud and there's music and flashing lights. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we don't take him somewhere where he's going to do that, so not saying it's horrible for everybody, but I'm just saying it's something to be, don't self-medicate, get therapy, talk to somebody, but look for the signs. And if you're close to somebody, I hate to say it, but don't be afraid, especially if you have experience with it, to say, like, if you knew my partner, let's say, and you were close enough and we didn't know we already had, you might say, have you guys considered, because I noticed these things, if you were close enough, because some people, there's a lot of things when the kids were young, have you ever considered ADHD? Well, I don't know what that is. Sure. Maybe we need to do that. But I would never have known that if somebody didn't say it, so I feel like,
I think it would have to be someone like you on the outside looking in. It's not going to be the person with PTSD that says, hey, you got PTSD. Unless, like you're saying, they're in that intimate situation and they're boys and especially guys. Girls would be like, girl, yes, I got PTSD. Yeah. What do you want to know about it? But guys in that intimate setting with another guy who's been bold enough to acknowledge that they have PTSD, they could probably reach that person, but but it would probably have to be someone on the outside.
But I don't think it's a negative thing.
No,
I think some people feel like it's embarrassing to say, and you may not even have a lot of signs or symptoms, but if you do, then you need to acknowledge that and do the right things to deal with it, not only for yourself, but your partners, your coworkers, your children. It's not just you who's affected by it. You might think this is my thing, this is my trauma, this is my issue. You think that, but how you deal with that trickles down to your partner, and your partner's dealing with your crap, and then your kids are dealing with that crap, but they don't know why, and you're not doing anything to help yourself, and everybody else, and you're just saying, this is my thing. Well, it's not really your thing. Because it is in some way affecting everybody. Because if they can't go do certain things, or they can't talk to you a certain way, or, you are nervous all the time, or you have depression, that affects everybody around you. So you can't look at it as it's my thing and my thing only.
That's true. That's a lot of good knowledge and nuggets there. So how do you cope with PTSD with your partner?
I think it's really hard as a partner because if you've never had it and you've never experienced it, you don't really fully it's just like anything in life. you don't understand what death feels like until you've experienced. You don't understand what marriage feels like to experience, you know? And so it's hard as a partner to really understand, like when they explain, I have all this stuff in my head, and they don't tell you what or why or where it came from, but I have all this stuff in my head and I'm always nervous, and you're like, well, just take a deep breath and just do this, and you're like, they're probably thinking like,
that does not work.
Right.
Why would you tell me that? I've been breathing all my damn life and it ain't working. Okay.
It's just hard as a partner because you want to make it. And then I'm oversensitive sometimes. Like we go somewhere and I'm constantly like, are you good? Are you good? Like, because I'll start to notice the room fills up. I'm starting to notice we're more on the back side because of how people came in, the doors over there. And I'm always like, are you good? Are you, you know, and then it eventually turns into, no, I'm not, you know, I can start to read it and I can see body language and I can see the facial expressions. I'm like, okay, they're trying to act like they're not uncomfortable because I'm having a good time, but I know they're uncomfortable. So you sometimes have to sacrifice yourself and what you want to do to ensure their peace of mind. And that can be hard sometimes because sometimes you just don't want to do that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's, you have to be kind of unselfish in that, right? And I think with my ex-husband, I was very young. We were young and military was new to me. The traumas were new to me. We just went from one horrible thing. They saw a lot of things on his deployments and then his friend dies and then his mother, and like I coped with it differently than he did. And being able to communicate, I don't think he could ever fully communicate what was going on with him. And so as a partner, you're trying to figure things out, but when people don't communicate, you're literally making your own story up in your head.
Yeah, that's I think one of the downsides of coping with PTSD. Like I don't know that I'm able to really express fully where my spouse understands like what triggers do to me. He could see the body language change. He could see my facial expression change. He can see that I get quiet and withdrawn. But that emotional clock and turmoil that's going on, he can't see that. And then I don't know that I understand all the triggers because sometimes this thing happens and I'm fine. Right. Sometimes the same thing happens and I'm not fine. And it might be because it was in a different environment, a different season, a different whatever. And I'm like, oh crap, I feel like deja vu. I'm right back in that same place because it looks like and feels like this thing is happening all over again. The communication, and I think the person being willing to go to therapy and really dig deep into why do I have PTSD? How do I understand it? Processing that trauma. So when I went through trauma therapy, they call it cognitive behavioral therapy. That's how you deal with the traumatic event. And you actually write it down, you read it, read it out loud. And I remember when I went to the therapist, I think it was like week 3 or 4, and she was like, okay, we've done all this work. Now you're going to read it out loud. And I said, no, the hell I'm not. She's like, yes, you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. And she was like, well, I guess this session will just sit here. And I was like, we wasting freaking time. What do you mean we're just going to sit here? And she was like, well, that's the exercise for today. So either you read it this week or we come back next week and we try it again. And I was like, that is horrible. But you kind of, when you're going through this therapy, have to understand that you're going to unpack that trauma. And so if you've had multiple traumas, you might start off with one, and then we're going to move to the next one, and then move to the next one. But that's the only way I was able to kind of see, wow, that is why I react the way that I do. That is why my thought pattern and processes are like this, is because I'm still stuck. Right. And if you don't want to be stuck anymore, what do you got to do? You got to deal with it. Yeah. You got to go deal with it and work through the therapy to be able to cope, because you're still going to live. You're still going to engage with people. You're still going to have those triggers. But if you want to live, you have to learn to let that go, or be able to deal with it in a manner that it doesn't put you in a space that you can't handle, or, put you emotionally in a space you can't handle.
Well, my current partner went to a place in Texas, and I can't remember what the name of the camp was. It's like a retreat for a couple weeks that for veterans and whatever. And like one of the things they emphasized a lot was your own time. Yeah. like self-care, but people hate that phrase sometimes, but your own time. So like the gym doesn't count as your own time because the gym is like you staying busy with something, keeping your brain. Your own time as in like, I'm going to go read, or I'm going to go sit in my thoughts, or I'm going to, because they feel like that's a part of you dealing with it and processing it. So the big thing that they did, and they did the light therapy where you don't have to talk, but they do the light therapy. And that's better for somebody who does not want to talk. So there are ways to get help if you do not want to talk. But I think taking that time for yourself is also very important as a partner who is with somebody with PTSD or the person who has PTSD, but taking that time for yourself for that self-care to do something that's not stressful or straining on your body to keep your brain busy and just deal with it, but yet something that is just for you, not your family, not your kids, just for you. If it's riding your bike, if it's fishing, something that's just totally peaceful for you. And I hope, more people, I think we all need that.
Yes.
Because we're so plugged into everything that somebody posted today, said something like, what would you do without social media? I was like, everybody would probably go back to being neighborly.
Yes, they probably
So
would.
Time for yourself is good.
Yeah. And I think on the partner side of that, being able to understand that person needs that time. And it's not like they're trying to get away from you or avoid you. Sometimes I just need to quiet my mind. And especially if I'm in that fight or flight moment in my head and he can see, oh, she's way over there. She is not here. Then he can sometimes be like, hey, are you okay? And then, yes, I'm okay. Let me go take 5 minutes to do a meditation or something to, be by myself. But it's not because I don't love you. Right. I just need this to get my head together. Yes.
And I think from my perspective, I feel like, and I could be wrong, so correct me, but men compartmentalize much better. It's almost like they shut it down and move it back, where I feel like we feel and see everything. Like I feel like women in general, I feel like kind of think about it more, feel it longer. But when something happens, I feel like men just kind of like shut it down, turn it off. I'm moving on and we're not talking about it, not dealing with it. Where you say, I'm going to need 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. I don't think they would say that.
I'm not going to say that either. I'm just going to shut down in my mind. I'm going to do like you said. I'm just zoning out. Yeah. So we could be talking. You done said something that triggered me and I'm just going to be.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting too. So maybe people aren't just ignoring you.
I just get quiet. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fuss.
Yeah.
We're just going to, and then I process it in my head.
Who have trauma from their childhood, from fighting or abuse. Yeah. That would make sense why some partners just get silent.
Yep.
Because they're probably zoning out or blocking that out because it's bringing back. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I just get quiet. I go into my, have you guys ever seen a movie, Sybil? Probably shouldn't, but Sybil is a movie about this young lady who has multiple personalities. Like she has, I think at the end she had like 24, 25, 29, something like that. But she was severely abused as a kid. And so her little girl personality would go sit in the corner and just cry with her little stuffed animal. And so that's kind of what, for me, from the childhood trauma, that's where I go. I go into my mind in the little corner. The little girl goes to sit down and she just like begs everything to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense though. So everything we do comes from something.
Yeah. Something.
So if you know somebody, encourage communication, therapy, and be receptive to hear and listen and be whatever support system that you can be for them, even if you don't understand it.
Yeah. Even if you don't understand it, that's the key part right there. Even if you don't understand it. And you might need to get therapy as well because it is not easy dealing with someone who has PTSD because, like Megan was saying earlier, what they go through affects you in every aspect of your life. So if you need help, please get help.
Yes. And we thank you guys for hanging out with us again.
Yes. So please share, and give us a rating. We love stars, so 5, please. And until next time, guys, have a great one. Bye.